Hello everyone and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar. Today is sponsored by Esri. I am Barbary Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, joined by my assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. If you have any questions, drop us a note in the chat and we'll do our best to help you. We hope that you'll stop by directionsmag.com for daily geospatial news, feature articles, and of course, more webinars. We're standing by to take your questions. Type those in the question box at any time during the webinar. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible during the Q&A time today. We are going to share all your questions with the fine folks over at Esri, and they will follow up with you after the webinar if we don't get to your question. Also, click that little camera button if you see something on the screen that you like. We are recording today's session, so expect a link to that recording as well as an attendance certificate in your inbox in the days following the webinar. And so we are excited today to have Christine Ma and Eric Whitner with us to talk about these top new features in ArcGIS Urban. Always fun to get to talk 3D GIS with the fine folks over at Esri. So Christine, Eric, welcome. We're excited to learn more. And over to you.
Thank you, Barbary. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Top 5 Features in ArcGIS Urban. My name is Christine Ma, and I'm a Smart Cities Account Executive at Esri.
And my name is Eric Whitner. I'm a Senior Park Manager focused on procedural technology and smart cities.
We are very excited to share some new features in the latest release of ArcGIS Urban. But before we get into the highlights, I'd like to quickly touch on why we built a web-based planning system like ArcGIS Urban in the first place. To explain, I thought I'd start in our home state of California. Here you'll notice we are in the red, meaning over the last 10 years, we have not been able to close the gap between projected housing needs and actual permitted housing units. To a certain extent, this is an urban planning issue. In California, cities and counties need to update zoning codes, streamline project review process, and accelerate housing production to provide more housing options. And while the specific challenges you are facing in your communities may vary, we believe the solutions to address them start with people. Planning stakeholders need to be able to create, collaborate on, and communicate key planning initiatives effectively. And more specifically, planning teams need tools to proactively build future scenarios, evaluate proposals in context, and digitally engage with the public. And citizens should be able to get involved on their own time and be consulted on the projects that impact their communities. And meanwhile, developers and AEC firms need access to real-world context and regulatory information as a basis for their projects and proposals. So we developed ArcGIS Urban, a modeling and planning system that enables stakeholder collaboration in a digital environment. So what can ArcGIS Urban do for your community? First, it can help streamline your project review process by visualizing proposals within the 3D context and supporting collaboration between public and private stakeholders. Users like the Boston Planning and Development Agency established a representation of their permitting pipeline to share across agencies and with the public. ArcGIS Urban can also help planners design 3D scenarios in-house directly from land use and zoning code. As more and more of our cities undergo zoning updates, Urban provides a modern approach. It converts your zoning into a 3D visual representation to drive detailed scenario planning down to the parcel level. And the impact of zoning change and development can then be analyzed with automatically generated capacity indicators, like, for example, new housing units. And this is an image of Uppsala, Sweden's plan to add 33,000 new housing units, visualized and analyzed using ArcGIS Urban. Furthermore, ArcGIS Urban can guide change and measure impact by communicating current status and future trends in your community. In the new release, we have added land use planning capabilities as well as more advanced capacity metrics to help move traditional policy interventions to a more analytical and scenario-driven process. And finally, Urban can enable cities to deliver digital engagement, giving planners and the public an easier way to collaborate at scale. So planners can not only inform citizens on a project, but also streamline feedback through plan and project-specific comments and suggestions. So now, after going through the 4 key planning workflows that Urban supports, I want to pause for a quick poll question.
Thanks for sharing, folks. Always good to get those insights as to the tools that you're using. Christine, back over to you.
Thank you, Barbary. Yeah, that's good to see where you're all at today. So now, Eric and I would like to take you inside ArcGIS Urban to take a look at the top 5 new features in our latest release. First, Eric will take you to beautiful Honolulu to share our newly added land use plans.
Thank you, Christine. So what we realized is that planners wanted to represent change at a much larger scale than with the specific zoning plans that we had previously. So with this release, we added land use plans. Think of land use plans as simplified version of zoning plans with impact and representation driven by density and use more than by regulation. Much like our zoning plans, right, they report capacity metrics, but they do not require the detailed procedural generation of 3D form to get to those metrics. They're coefficient driven, but you can still use them to create representations of those forms. We recognize that in the case of land use planning, it's often being applied to green space where you don't have existing parcelization, or it's being applied across an area where you're going to redo the parcels and change their configuration. Or you actually want to work in a more abstract way. And so one of the things we did when building these land use plans is build this ability to create conceptual objects that you could apply land use to. So I'm going to go in here, and for this development here in East Kapolei, create a new scenario. And then for that scenario, I'm going to take the area of interest, which is around these 3 transit stations, and split them into a grid. And you can see here we have the geometric tools, split, merge, but we have a new one called grid. I click that. I can specify the size of the grid, the spacing, and apply that. And instantaneously, I get this sort of template or tracing paper that I can use to apply zoning to, or sorry, a land use to. We recognize that when people are applying it, they don't want to select individual features, especially when you're building these kinds of abstract grids. So we added a new paint tool, a template-based painting tool. So you select the land use you want to apply, draw on anything that falls, touches within where you're drawing, right, becomes that land use type. So it allows me to very rapidly create representations of change across this abstract grid. Now, rather than have you watch me do that for all these, I'm going to flip to a scenario that I've already created a representation of change for. Now, land uses, they also store allowed building space use types inside of them, and you can validate your zoning against your land use to make sure that your zoning regulation complies to the changes that you've proposed. And if you want to, you can actually even create 3D representations by using an allocation tool to allocate building types across specific land use types to add more detail. So we've added more capabilities for creating these better plausible building forms based on regulation that can drive those better 3D representations. And to talk a little bit more about that, specifically about sky planes, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Eric. The second new feature we've added is a sky plane functionality. Now, the great thing about being in a virtual setting today is that we can quickly travel from Honolulu all the way to Boston. I'm now in the zoning plan in Boston's Dorchester Avenue. Zoning plan is another plan type in Urban that supports a targeted approach to implementing land use changes and updating zoning code. So here I'm going to turn on the zoning envelopes for those 3 parcels. And this 3D visualization shows the maximum extent that a structure would need to fall within based on the zoning parameters of maximum height, FAR, allowed space use types. We can also configure additional rules for each zone related to things like tiers and setbacks. And here we've added a new sky plane parameter, which can be set by parcel edges. So I can add a sky plane for front street edge and set an angle of 70 degrees. We can also enter a vertical or horizontal offset to define the starting point of the sky planes. And here we can see the buildable envelopes are updated with a new sky plane constraint. It's really designed to preserve the access to the open sky from the street and can shape the downstream building form and design. So if I choose a building type to develop for this parcel, for example, the Dot Avenue high-rise residential with office, and you can see the building form being generated based on the proposed building type. And similar to other zoning parameters, I can go ahead and override the sky plan parameter on the parcel level. So I can change the angle to 45 degrees and see the building form update in real time. Within the building type configuration panel, I have additional control over building forms on the parcels. So I can increase the residential floors. I have added a maximum footprint length and width. I can even choose an alignment of the building to prioritize a specific edge orientation. In this case, I like to make sure the building footprint is aligned to the front edge of the parcels. And you can see the building form will update based on the alignment priority and increase in number of floors. I can propose different building types on the other 2 parcels here very quickly. And let's choose high-rise office with retail. And finally, you can also drop down to Street View for detailed side-by-side comparison. You can see the proposal on the left and Street View on the right. With this new release, you can leverage new rules, parameters, and constraints to better visualize and communicate the long-range planning vision for the city. Next, Eric will show us one of the new analysis tools in ArcGIS Urban, line of sight.
Thank you, Christine. So let's say that you've built a representation of a proposed plan. You've looked at the visual impact through that side-by-side comparison with real-world imagery, but you want to do some visibility analysis. Well, we've added a new tool into our interactive tool set called line of sight. So in the ArcGIS Urban viewer, if you look on the bottom right side, we have these interactive tools in a group. We also have, of course, the scene controls for lighting, etc. If you click on the interactive tools, we've added in this new one that allows you to drop in interactive lines of sight. You first go and find a place where you want to place an observer. So let's say I'm concerned that the resident in this house, their view is going to be impacted by this proposed design. Then I place a target, and I can see if it's green, that I can see clearly all the way down that line of sight. As I move the mouse, the line, I get a new line of sight, and it interactively tells me where my line of sight is broken. And I can place multiple targets across my scene to do a cumulative assessment of line of sight to understand the impacts of a proposed design. And these objects persist, so I can look at them. I can also rotate the scene and look at them from different perspectives or zoom in on my design to understand where the impact is happening with my proposed design. So this is just another way, along with that immersive spherical imagery, to understand the visual impact of a proposed design. But what if after doing that interactive design as a member of the public, I want to leave a comment about my concern? So I'm going to turn it over to Christine to talk about some of our new public engagement capabilities.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Another new feature we added is the fourth new one, public feedback. And for this new release, we've added the ability for stakeholders and the public to provide feedback on the plans and projects that are shared with them. So you can configure and customize the feedback categories in order to contextualize the comments and analyze the results. So here I can add a new category to my feedback. And let's call it ideas. And give it a light bulb icon. And now I have a total of 9 categories that the public can choose from when adding new comments. After that, back in Urban's overview, also part of the new release, I can now filter the content by permission status. So I can choose to see just my own content, content shared across the organization, or in this case, I want to see content shared publicly. So you can see the Western Avenue plan is shared publicly, and I can now enable public feedback on the plan for a 1 month period from today. So let's set the end date to August 1st. You can see there has already been some anonymous feedback since the plan has shared publicly. I can even switch the base map to satellite to see the true reality of the existing condition. Here you're seeing Boston's 3D mesh provided by Nearmap, our 3D content partner. And to add a new comment, users can simply drag the feedback bubble to the map, choose the category, and entering their feedback. Here I like to see improved pedestrian and biking access connecting to the river. And you can see the comment shows up on the map and also in the list on the left. The scale of the feedback collection can be large or small. You can enable this for your citywide comprehensive plan update, for corridor study, or you can leverage it as internal commenting tools to support interdepartment collaboration. And after the feedback period, you can download the geolocated comments and run analysis and reports, and even share it through a web map for public display. This public feedback functionality drives digital engagement. It allows for more focused comments on individual scenarios over a defined period of time. And for the 5th new feature, Eric is going to talk about our most wanted enhancement by urban users, new capacity metrics.
Thank you, Christine. So measuring the impact of plans, especially the scenarios and plans, on the surrounding urban environment is critical. And to that end, we've added a variety of new capacity metrics out of the box. So if you've worked with urban before, zones have buildings and different building types associated with them. Those building types have different building space uses inside of them. And those building space uses drive the total capacity metric. So the larger amount of retail space, the more jobs you have, et cetera. So what we've done is we've expanded the number of capacity metrics that we provide out of the box. Initially, it was population, households, and jobs, but we've added in the total number of parking spaces created, the parking spaces required by residents and jobs, the number of vehicle trips, energy use, CO2 production, internal water production, waste production. And these are all selection-sensitive capacity metrics, so you can measure them across your whole plan or on a specific individual building or parcel that you're modifying. They're not trapped in ArcGIS Urban. You can get them out, so you can download them to Excel and use them in reporting. So here we see all those same capacity metrics listed out. Across the top in the columns are our various scenarios, so we can compare scenarios to each other and understand what the impact of each of our proposals is. And then, of course, paired with these capacity metrics, we also have a breakdown of the different space use types and the different zoning types or land use types, so you can kind of reassociate those. Let's actually take a look at how these are set up, because they function a little bit different than our previous capacity metrics. Our previous capacity metrics were derived purely from space use. So here I'm going to create a totally new space use type. Since this is Honolulu and on the beach, I want to have a beer. I'm going to add a brewery. So here's the brewery. I'm going to give it, a space efficiency, a floor height. But when I click to the capacity metrics tab, we're going to see a lot of new features. You notice households, jobs, et cetera, are driven by the amount of space use, but some of these are what we call secondary capacity metrics. So the number of vehicle trips or the amount of CO2 is based on the total number of population, the total number of households, and the total number of jobs created by each space use. So let's go ahead and fill that out. So we know we're going to generate 2 vehicle trips per job that we have at the brewery, and there we go. Where does this information come from? So for the US default template, we created some defaults and did some research and created some plausible defaults, but you need to do additional research to set the correct values for your space use types. We used the residential building inventory survey, the commercial building inventory survey, US EPA standards for greenhouse gas emissions, EPA standards for water consumption to sort of establish those. And if you look in the documentation, you can see where we got some of that data and use it as a foundation for setting good baselines for yourself. And in the immortal words of Steve Jobs, I know we showed 5 things, but there's always one more thing. We've improved the project creation capabilities of ArcGIS Urban. And I want to turn it over to Christine to show this new capability.
Thanks, Eric. I'm very honored to show you the one more thing today. And I also think it's the most fun and exciting addition to this version of ArcGIS Urban, project editing. Projects in Urban are designed to streamline the project review process in current planning. And they can be connected to your permitting system to visualize proposals in context. Projects now have an editing experience, which allows you to quickly sketch a proposed development in 3D. So here I'm adding the project by simply drawing the boundary on the map. Let's give it a name. I'm going to copy and paste a description, point it to a thumbnail, define the start and end date for the project. Once the project is created, I can get into the editing mode just like plans. And the first step is to take a look at the existing condition by turning on the 3D mesh from Nearmap. You can see this area is currently being used as a vehicle storage and construction yard. Now I'm going to demolish the existing structures on the site within the study area boundary. And let's quickly sketch some new buildings on site. I'll add a 55-foot building by simply drawing it on the map, and then a 90-foot building right next to it. And from here, all the points, edges, and surfaces can be selected, moved, and modified independently, allowing you to create your own unique building designs. You can also define the ground type and add open space or water body. You can add other design components from our 3D object library, like trees, for example. Urban offers a very extensive selection of tree types for you to choose from, and I can easily rotate them or scale them. We also have vehicle design assets like cars, buses, and even bikes. I can also add them in. You can also add bus stops and other street furniture like benches and street lights. This interactive design process allows us to quickly create multiple sketch scenarios and share them internally or with the public. And we actually use the building model in the project as a representation in the overview. And just like before, you can choose to enable public feedback for each scenario. And the project editing feature allows you to quickly sketch the massing of a proposal in 3D and share the design concept with your stakeholders. So this concludes the top 5 new features of Urban and one more thing of project editing.
Great information.
This is sort of ideal this is sort of ideal because these will be a focus for our next release as we work on project submission, is improving and adding more of the two capabilities. So I'm glad to see these survey results. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a great segue for the next session for Eric to mention and share a little bit more about our roadmap moving forward.
Yeah, so in June, we really focused on these 5 core workflows: comprehensive planning, specific plans, development review, urban design and visualization, and community engagement. I think we showed most of these features, but there's a couple I did want to call out. There is a new building allocation tool, which allows you to allocate different building types by percentages across different land uses or different zones. Many of the capabilities, the new capacity metrics, the minimum maximum building forms, the paint and the gridding tools, are shared between comprehensive plans and specific plans, shared between land use plans and zoning plans, so you can use them in either location. In terms of development review, we showed the project editing and the line of sight. The other thing that we're still working on is an API for being able to support external applications touching and using projects and plans from ArcGIS Urban. And that will enable third-party systems like permitting systems to start to be able to push up and publish projects directly in ArcGIS Urban. We continue to work on improving our design and visualization capabilities with our integration with CityEngine, using it as a site planning tool. And then in CityEngine itself, we added in more capabilities for physics-based rendering. So you can do higher-end visuals directly inside CityEngine without having to take it out to another application. But if you really want to make something gorgeous and polished, you can always go out to something like Unity or Unreal, right, or something like Twinmotion to create really high-end visuals. And then adding in these community engagement, these public feedback tools. Our primary focus for the next release really is going to be project submission and expanding our editing capabilities to support project submissions, such as upload of 3D models like Collada models or OBGA models, and being able to place those interactively in a project, and then improving the editing experience so it's more intuitive and easier to use. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the broader capabilities that come with ArcGIS Urban. Of course, it's a system of record for zoning and land use regulation and captures project activity across the city, and that's all exposed through this web-based application we've been showing you throughout this webinar. But it is part of the larger ArcGIS platform, so it can be expanded, and we can expand its capabilities with additional software. First of all, right, we can connect ArcGIS Urban to Hub and use Hub as our platform for community engagement, and wrap plans and projects and surveys or story maps or specific web-based experiences, and then deliver those to citizens in structured ways through ArcGIS Hub to create a public engagement platform for planning. Of course, if we're looking at doing detailed design, we have CityEngine. CityEngine reads ArcGIS Urban's plans directly. You can edit and modify them, and you can apply more advanced rules to create more compelling visual representations or more detailed representations. And Urban and CityEngine share the same scenario model. So you're going to see the same scenarios you have in Urban that you have in CityEngine, and you can make modifications to them there. We've shown some analytical capabilities, but of course there's this incredibly deep, rich capability of our core desktop platform, ArcGIS Pro, to do advanced analysis. And so you can pull a plan or project in a Pro because it's just a set of services to do advanced analysis on it. And with the release of the API, we're actually going to be releasing a connector for Pro that honors plans and projects in ArcGIS Urban as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Christine to talk a little bit about how to get started with the ArcGIS Urban.
Wonderful. So while they are thinking about that, let's get a quick question before we get to Q&A. Guys, someone would like to know if urban can be suburban.
Yeah, so urban isn't limited just to big cities. It does work for smaller, less dense cities. I mean, one of our example cities is Hardyville, and Hardyville has a pretty small population. Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, it's between 7,000 or 8,000.
It's actually 6,000.
6,000, so even a little bit smaller. So there's no constraint on urban that it has to be used for very large, very dense cities. It is supportive of suburban areas and suburban development, and we actually have procedural capabilities that do things like split out townhomes or single family homes that are more typical in suburban environments.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to mention that, as you saw today, urban is designed to support key planning workflows like streamlining project review, creating zoning and development scenarios, and digitally engaging with the public. And these workflows should be part of any planning process, no matter how small or large the city is. And with the added land use planning capabilities that Eric showed us, urban can also support long-range planning at county and even regional level. So really, it's a dynamic solution that serves the needs of small township all the way to cities, counties, and regions.
So some great feedback coming in from our audience. Lots of folks excited about line of sight. Someone says line of sight was my top pick. And folks looking forward to enterprise, excited about being able to change things on the fly, on planning. And oh my goodness, so many more that we will be sure and share all of these with the Christine and Eric and the other good folks over at Esri. I know that they are thrilled to see all this information. That's wonderful. Thanks, folks.
Definitely. Thank you for the feedback, everyone. And now I'd like to take some time to discuss how you can get started with ArcGIS Urban to support your work. First, let's touch on the data layers behind ArcGIS Urban. The urban model is composed of 4 base layers: the 3D base map, which is a set of 3D buildings, trees, and elevation data. I will go into more detail on this in the next slide. In addition to setting up the base map, you will need to add your land use and zoning information to be used in urban. We have templated tables to upload your land use and zoning parameters. And the next base layer is parcels. Parcels in urban are used as the basis for visualizing development constraints, as well as generating the building forms. And finally, projects. This is a layer that represents your building permitting pipeline and can be overlaid on the 3D city model. In addition to the base layers, urban comes with a series of defaults that can be localized. The 2 primary types of defaults are space use types and building types. Space use types hold the coefficients to drive the capacity metrics for housing, daily trips, and so on. And they also help in cross-checking zoning against your land use plans. And the second default, building types, which are made up of space use types, can be configured to represent typical developments in your community. And I wanted to zoom in and touch on one of the base layers, 3D base maps. Many of you might already have a 3D base map, or at least the ingredients to make one. One option is to use LiDAR and building footprint polygons to extract the 3D buildings, trees, and elevation for the boundary that you define. For this step, you can leverage the free local government 3D base map solution that Esri offers. And if you do not have building footprint data, in most cases, you can use high-quality LiDAR to extract building footprint features. Another option is to leverage content from 3D data provider, like our partner Nearmap. Nearmap provides high-resolution 3D mesh for ArcGIS Urban with coverage in major metropolitan areas of the US, Canada, and Australia. The mesh can be hosted as the satellite-based map option in Urban and represents existing condition for site analysis. When it comes to deploying and using Urban for your projects, generally there are 3 steps to get started. You first need to unlock the Urban modeling capability within your existing GIS system by acquiring ArcGIS Urban licenses. And then you'll be able to create your ArcGIS Urban model with the data layers that we just covered. You can do this yourself, or you can leverage Esri's professional services Urban Launch Kit to deploy the model in your own environment. And this Launch Kit also includes knowledge transfer to the entire team so that you can expand and maintain your Urban model over time. And finally, once you have your Urban model ready, you can then build scenarios for your focused projects. For this step, you can also work with our Urban specialty partners who can provide focused support for your planning projects. This is a list of our current Urban specialty partners who, in addition to Esri professional services, are capable of covering anything from launching ArcGIS Urban to planning-related domain expertise in comprehensive plan updates, zoning updates, specific plans, and so on. And now some resources to help you get started. And you can schedule a meeting with our team to discuss implementing ArcGIS Urban for your community. You can also request to try ArcGIS Urban for free if you have a project you'd like to use Urban for. Please send the request email to smartplanning@esri.com. We can have a quick call on how you'd like to leverage the trial and how to activate it. Finally, we also have an ebook published free for you to download. Of course, we'll also send you all those links in a follow-up email. So let's get started. If you want to leverage ArcGIS Urban or share a demo with your team, please schedule a meeting with us using this URL, go.esri.com/top5. And now we'd like to open up for questions from the audience. You can enter the questions directly in the chat window. And Barbary, do we have any questions that have already come in?
Definitely. We have lots of questions. So we'll just start down our list, all sorts of topics to cover here. So first, when will Urban be coming to Enterprise?
So we've hired a developer focused on the enterprise conversion of ArcGIS Urban. We don't want to give we can't give a solid date yet, but the goal is to have it by the end of 2021. And that, of course, has a whole bunch of development capabilities, but that's the target for an enterprise Urban.
Wonderful. I know that'll be good news for a lot of folks. Folks are wondering, is there a Street View service hosted by Esri, or is it imagery collected for that specific project and then published as an orientated imagery?
Yeah, so the Street View imagery is right now coming from Mapillary. So you have to go to Mapillary's website and get an application ID, register an account. It's publicly collected imagery, mostly crowdsourced. Some of it is professionally collected that cities have agreed to share publicly. So the coverage varies from city to city. It's free to use up to a certain number of downloads. So once you get your app ID, you can insert it in there and go ahead and use your imagery. We are looking at providing an app ID out of the box with ArcGIS Urban. So Mapillary has announced sort of an exciting collaboration with Facebook on the collection and sharing of this data, even for commercial uses. So hopefully within the next release, we'll be able to just include a built-in API key, and you'll be able to access that imagery without having to do any effort.
Wonderful. So at the moment, feedback of different urban models in one organization is stored in the same hub annotations layer. Will urban models have their own annotations layer in the future?
That's a good enhancement request. We have been working with the hub team on trying to create some tools that are focused on filtering and managing the comments, so you can pick out what they're related to, specific plans, specific projects, and specific instances of urban. So I'll add it to the potential roadmap of capabilities that maybe we need a unique annotation layer per urban instance, or you can configure and target a specific annotation layer within an instance of urban.
Excellent. Is the near map mesh available for all ArcGIS Urban users, and is this available for use within ArcGIS Pro?
I can take that.
I'll go ahead and, yeah, I'll pass it to Christine.
Sure. Yeah. So Nearmap is one of our 3D data partner, and they do provide high-resolution 3D mesh for ArcGIS Urban, and they have coverage in major metropolitan areas in the U.S., Canada, and Australia. Right now, it's not coming out of box with ArcGIS Urban, but if you're interested, we can definitely connect you with the partner Nearmap and discuss, how you can leverage the 3D mesh for the satellite-based map option in ArcGIS Urban.
Wonderful. Next question, will in the future the 3D editing results be visible in the preview project mode and not only in the editing mode?
Is that a question related to the project editing? And I think that's already available in the overview mode.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean they're visible in the overview. So I think that's already there.
So for project editing, you can see now I'm in the overview mode after creating this model, and it's the representation of the building itself right now. So we don't see other design components like the ground or the trees in the overview. But Eric, is there a plan of adding that to the overview as well, in addition to the buildings?
I mean, it'll probably be within the scenarios themselves that will allow those additional features, and they'll be stored in a different type of service that we're building specifically for that task. But for the overview, I think we want to stick to the simplified representation for the time being, just for ease of understanding reasons.
Excellent.
Great. And similar to plans, you can enable public feedback and allow public to provide comments on this project. Right. Thank you.
When you are on the line of buildings here, when you are sketching buildings in project, can you add multiple floors and have them feed indicators?
Not yet. So that's an enhancement that's on the way. So right now, when you're creating buildings, they're just visual representations. What we're going to add is the ability to call space use types in parts of buildings. And then once buildings have space uses or defined space uses, those space uses will drive the generation of capacity metrics. You also get the thematic coloring appropriate to the space use that you've assigned to that portion of the building.
Excellent. Someone would like to know if it's possible to save a line of sight analysis.
No. So line of sight is an interactive tool, so it's not persisted. So there's no way to export those lines out. In general, we're trying to make our interactive tools about driving design decisions. So in real time, not persisted, but we recognize that some people may want to persist those. So that's something we can look at on the roadmap. probably something we'll address once we've added a few more analytical tools. So for instance, once we have view shed and view dome, you know, some shadow impact analysis, shadow differences, or cumulative shadows, we're going to need a way to persist those analysis and those analysis states so that people can go back to them. So on the roadmap, but it's a longer term item.
Okay. Question about the allocation tool, wanting to know, does it work with control totals, suitability analysis, supply and demand models?
Yeah, no, this first pass of allocation is very simple. It's just a percentage breakdown of building types applied across an area. So there's no constraint, for instance, on setting a maximum gross floor area that can be allocated within that selected development. So we are looking at, in the long term, at a kind of a more I guess complex or detailed implementation called place type allocation, where we actually define whole place types and they have mixes, and you're trying to meet target mixes, and that's on the roadmap, but that's probably not for the next release. Probably that's more of a 2021 type feature where we have that interaction between suitability and place type allocation.
Okay. Is creating street networks coming anytime soon?
Not anytime soon. So that's a 2021 or beyond capability. We recognize that people who use ArcGIS Urban in parallel with City Engine, they're opening a plan or a project. You know, one of the very common experiences is they bring in the buildings and then they drop in street center lines from GIS information and build really interesting or compelling looking streets. And they want to use those streets and the changes that they've modified in those streets to, you know, affect changes on the edges and the attributes of the edges of various parcels in ArcGIS Urban, and actually want to be able to bring the visual representations of those changes to streets back to Urban. So that's, again, on the roadmap, but that's farther down the road. We are looking at some closer term changes to City Engine. One of the things that some of the users have expressed is the desire to be able to publish streets from City Engine back to ArcGIS Online as integrated mesh scene services, so that they perform well and they scale well and they have nice multi-LED support, and then you could include them in as context information inside of a plan for ArcGIS Urban. So that's something that's on the roadmap for City Engine.
Excellent. Someone would like to know, are there still demo cities to explore? They say they aren't finding those on the website.
Christine, do you want to hit on that one?
Yeah, I'm actually going to the website right now. Let's see.
Yeah, we should still have our example cities up. Hardyville, Melbourne, Boston, and I'm blocking on one now.
Boston, Uppsala, but
Uppsala.
you're right. Yeah. Actually, we don't see it directly from the website, but that's because we just had a new release I think 1 week ago. Let me double check with the team.
You would need to sign in. So you should see it when you do, because it's asking you to create. Yeah, you're right. That's right. That seems to have disappeared. Okay, well we'll double check on that and get those example cities back up.
They'll find it. Wonderful. Good question. Someone says they are working on accessibility assessment and mobility. How can this tool be used for such an assessment purpose?
Yeah, I mean, you could take the plans that you've generated, the plausible building forms out of ArcGIS Urban, and use the capacity metrics that are generated in there, the simple vehicle trips, the population, number of households, et cetera, as source data in that accessibility analysis if you wanted to test a proposed plan or a scenario from a proposed plan. The other way is if you're doing sort of baseline analysis of accessibility or mobility in an urban landscape, you can publish that back as an indicator to ArcGIS Urban so that other people who are doing or using ArcGIS Urban as a planning tool can see the results of that kind of analysis. And I mentioned just briefly there the connector for Urban and ArcGIS Pro. One of the workflows that's focused on supporting is the publishing of indicators to ArcGIS Urban.
Yeah, I also mentioned that you can do the accessibility assessment and mobility assessment in ArcGIS Pro or City Engine and share that results through ArcGIS Urban as indicators.
Excellent. Is it possible to extract the public feedback directly to a dashboard based on a feature service?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Yes, you can. So the feedback and all the comments are basically geolocated points, and you can download it to GIS format, or you can share it in the operations dashboard and create a more interactive public display. So yes, you can download it, or you can run reports as an Excel table.
Great. And I noticed that snapping is important to a lot of folks. So if it says snapping is important if you want to use parcels already in place, when can we expect that snapping functionality?
Yeah, so the snapping is a challenging thing to implement because all the things we're visualizing are in the graphics card and from the browser. So we're working with the JavaScript API team, who's the ones responsible for building our web-based 3D technology. They're building out a framework for web-based snapping for us. You know, targeted to have some of those improvements by the end of the year. So we'll start seeing snapping and inference be incorporated into our editing tools sometime next year. Maybe as soon as the later release this year, but I think it's probably more likely the first release of 2021.
Excellent. And we've got time maybe for one more question here. How can I access the API that was shown on one of the slides?
Yeah, so the API is not publicly available yet. We're still working on finishing it up and releasing it. We are planning to release that likely asynchronously with our main urban releases, since it's not a feature change or new capabilities we're adding to the application. Tentatively, we're targeting September as our release for the API, but that's again a estimated target.
Sounds great. Well, I just want to remind folks to head over to go.esri.com/top5. Thank you again to Christine and Eric for stopping by with these beautiful new features. Very exciting.
Yeah, with that, thank you so much for the feedback and really good questions. And our team's email address is on the screen here. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss leveraging Urban in your own projects. Thanks again.
Wonderful. So folks, keep an eye on that inbox. We will be in touch with the recording as well as your attendance certificate, and hope that you go make it a great day and tell a friend about Esri and ArcGIS Urban and Directions Magazine.